for having me. What an absolute honor to be here. And thank you for the partnership. I was saying to Val earlier, we always gravitate towards companies and people who share the same vision that we do. And so partnering with IRMSA has been, almost a marriage made in heaven, which, as we all know, those are quite difficult to find. So thank you for the partnership. And also thank you for having me. It is such a pleasure and such an honor. I was thinking about this, in terms of, does one write a very long speech and, talk about a lot of jargon, etc. And I thought, I don't always get the opportunity to just be myself and to just share from my heart. So for those of you that know me, you'll know that I've grown over the years and I've become quite unashamedly me. And so that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to talk about the lessons and also the opportunities that I have had in life and how I have traversed them. And I really think that, we all don't have enough time in terms of years lived to make all the mistakes that are possible. So if nothing else, my sharing with you is to help you use your time more wisely, and hopefully there's something that serves you. And so please feel free to steal it and use it. And if it doesn't, feel free to leave it behind. I always say that being present is very important because this moment will never come again. And it is really pregnant with possibility. But if we must look back, I think what I have learned is to look back with love, with forgiveness, with joy, and with gentleness, and with the intention to share something that will hopefully be value. I do strive to be of value in life. And so creating value is very important to me. Executing on value, delivering value is something that really speaks to me. And so I was reading a book. It was called Women Who Run with Wolves. And I loved one of the quotes. It said, if you have never been called a defiant, incorrigible, and impossible woman, have faith. There is still time. And so I think for me, the one of the things I want to say to dear younger me is, I'm quite proud to say that I have been called these adjectives and many more like them because of the way that I have decided to challenge the status quo. It has been an intentional choice. I stepped up, in my life. And so I wear these adjectives as a badge of honor. I don't look at them as being, something negative. I choose to challenge the traditional thinking, the paradigms that exist. I have refused to blend into the crowd. I chose to stand out and be counted. I have chosen to be brave and bold in the face of adversity. And I have demanded what is right for me and for us. And so sometimes it's a lonely path, charting new possibilities. However, I have had most fun for the most part of it. And so, dear younger self, I have lived a life that has been filled with purpose and meaning. And I have loved just about every single moment of it. So know that thus far, and I say thus far, dear younger me, for there is still much more living to be done. Thus far, we should be proud of ourselves, for we have not just survived, we have thrived. An important caveat for me is to remind you that I am not the CEO. I am not the mother of my children. I am not just a daughter or a sister or an aunt or a mentor. I am Videsha. I am me. And so all of these different roles and titles that exist around me is what makes up me. And so I often get, asked, how different are you when you're in the workplace versus when you're at home? And I always say that must be quite stressful to be different people in different environments. So for me, integrity has been very important, and having alignment in terms of what I say, the words that I use, my beliefs and my value system, and then the actions that come from it is really important, whether I am in the workplace or doing other things in my life. So today, when I talk about my lessons, some of them are specific to being a CEO and a leader. Some are specific to being a mom. Some are specific to being a coach and a mentor. But really, I am the sum of all the experiences that I've had in my life. I am not good at being boxed, and I will not be defined by a title. So good or bad, these are the experiences of Videsha. And so I wanted to share some of the lessons with my younger self, but also with you guys. And I think some of them would have made my journey a lot smoother had I learned them earlier in life. My first one is know your why. I think when I was younger, I really spent a lot of time just flitting from this job to that job and not really knowing why I was doing it and what was my purpose. What was it that gives me meaning? What is it that really brings joy in all areas of my life, not just from a corporate perspective. And so it has taken me a while to understand that I am an uplifter of humanity. The things that make me really excited is when I inspire and help others reach their full potential. And so for me, working on the plight of women and the girl child, making sure that we advance the rule of law to create equitable societies and give free access to all opportunities is really important because it speaks to my why. And I have learned that leaving the world a better place than I found it is important to me. So that is my why. I think it is important that we all sit down and have very honest conversations with ourselves, because once you know your why, I believe the how becomes much easier. I've also learned to be honest with myself, which is quite a difficult thing to do. We all put out there many faces of ourselves, but taking time to sit down and be with yourself is quite a scary thing sometimes. And so I've also learned that giving constructive feedback is very easy, but receiving feedback makes you vulnerable, but at the same time, it is an absolute gift. And so I have learned to solicit feedback from the people around me. And I honor the gift of feedback because feedback is a gift by taking that feedback and implementing it into my lives. And sometimes, guys, life will throw you a curveball. And I do believe, in the words of Viktor Frankl, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose. And in that response that we choose to give lies our growth and our freedom. So intentionally choosing to respond and not react is where our power lies. And I've also learned that out of that, contrast is not always a bad thing. It's actually a great thing. When you have to go through trials and tribulations, it really is key to understanding what you don't want in life. And then it gives you a very deep understanding of what you do want and what you are willing to accept and what you are not willing to accept. So it is time to unearth your why and then live your best life. One of my other lessons is to be selfish. I think it is one of the best compliments I have ever received when I was told, "Oh, you're so selfish. You only think about your happiness." And initially, there was a lot of guilt that came with it. But when I thought about it, and I do believe that you cannot pour from an empty cup. So you have to feed yourself. You have to feed your body, your mind. Sometimes I feed the body too much, but you have to feed your body, your mind, and your soul in ways that really nourishes you and lets you be the best you that you can be. And really, I think it is quite arrogant of us to always say, "Oh, I'll do it tomorrow," because you assume that tomorrow will come. There are many that tomorrow did not come for. So make sure you take the time, put the time aside for yourself. And stretching yourself is really important, yes, but don't stretch yourself to the point where you break. Know your limits. And so make sure your cup runs over and make sure that you surround yourself by people who really inspire you to be better. Also be aware of your inner dialogue. We say be self-aware. What does that really mean? I have found that in many instances in my life, I've not been aware of the inner talk, the inner dialogue that goes on that really ends up not helping me grow as a human being. So check that inner dialogue. We all know the story of Ben, who has 5 of the 8 skill sets that are required for a new vacancy. And then there's Susan, who has 7.5 of the 8 plus an additional 3. But Susan's inner dialogue is about how I don't have that 0.5 skill set. I'm not worthy of this role. I'm setting myself up for failure. It's easier to be, safe. And so Susan does not apply for the role, and Ben gets the job. And then everybody tells Susan, well, you were the best fit for this job. Why did you not apply? And so I always say, guys, nobody needs enemies when you are your own worst saboteur. So make sure that you're aware of that inner dialogue. Check it. Speak to yourself kindly. Use good words, positive words. Inspire yourself. Be your own fan club. Think intentionally. Think loving thoughts. And most importantly, love yourself, because you, more than anyone else, should be a beneficiary of the love that we as women generally so easily give to others. I've also learned that failure is a greater teacher than success. But it's important to fail fast and to fail forward. When we fail, it's okay to have a down day, take a day or two to cry on the shoulder of somebody that wants to listen, but then pick yourself up, get back on that horse and get going. Failure is definitely a stepping stone to success. And sometimes failure and rejection is actually a blessing in disguise. I remember when I was the head of the South African operations of a multinational. And, I was next in line to be the head of Africa. It was the natural progression. I'd done the stretch assignments. I understood what was required. And so when the vacancy was released, everybody knew this was Videsha's next role. And lo and behold, my horror and surprise when I learned from my then manager that, they had decided to bring somebody in from HQ rather, because he needed field experience to become a VP. And the worst thing was, when I said, this is not fair, she said, yes, this is not fair, Videsha. It is what it is. And so once again, that was an opportunity for me to look at how I responded. Between that stimulus and my response was a space for me to think about how I was going to react. And I could have left, but this was my baby. I had grown Africa. And so for me, it was important to see it through. And so I decided I was going to put my head down and do my work as I always did. And then 6 months later, there was new leadership, there was a reorganization that happened, and that role, the Africa head, became redundant. And my role, which was the head of Africa, stayed because it had the required criteria to stay. And so that rejection at the time was not a pleasant thing, but in hindsight, it was a blessing in disguise. And so I have learned that really what is meant for you will come to you when you are ready and when the timing is right. One of my other lessons in life has been around titles versus skill sets. For as long as I can remember, since I entered the corporate world, I dreamt of being the MD, the person at the top of that ladder, the one that, gets to be the face of a company. And so when I got there, I expected fireworks, to come out of the skies. I expected etheric trumpets to play and for there to be orchestral music in the background. And yet it was just another day in the life of many people. Yes, for me, it was a special one. But, I learned that getting to the top, having the title, whether it's in the middle, in the junior, at the top of an organization, it's just a title. The work carries on, and that's what defines you, is your work and how you deliver. And so collecting titles is not important. Collecting skill sets is. So what I have learned is to spend my time, which is quite precious, really understanding the skill sets that are required in order for me to be able to grow, be it as a human being, be it as a CEO, be it as a mom, etc. And then really fine tuning and bringing those skill sets into my bag of tricks and tips. And so skill sets for me is really about building longevity. We all know that a title can disappear overnight, and that is the reality. But skill sets have longevity and they add to your balance sheet. So I also warn myself to be aware of the arrogance that sometimes seeps in when you get a title, and this is where being self-aware is important. It's where you need to be aware of your biasness. You need to be aware of your conditioning, and you have to be open to diversity. And this is where surrounding yourself with a team that is better than you is key. So I always say building a bench that is enviable is important, because having diverse opinions and views, having people that call you out on your bullshit, on your biasness, on doing things the old way, on making, defending the status quo, is very important, because that is what grows organizations, and that is what helps you grow as a human being as well. And so be aware that when you become the head of something new, whether it's a head of a department, the CEO, a coach, etc., what got you there is not what is going to keep you there. You have to be willing to evolve. And part of that evolution is bringing in diverse aspects. Diversity is really a competitive advantage that we must all learn to use for our growth. And so some of the other things that I think is really important is the work-life balance. Guys, shall we talk about that for a moment? Work-life balance is an interesting myth. I always say I am a masterpiece in progress, but there is no work me and life me. Like I said before, I am a holistic human being. And so I have learned to, it really depends on the phase that you are at in your life. And sometimes one element suffers at the hands of another. Sometimes family takes center stage. I once had to, I'd love to share with you, I was asked to speak on the disappearing woman syndrome in corporate, where, many women, when they reach middle to senior management, tend to disappear out of the corporate system. And I laughed at that description, like the disappearing woman syndrome. And I said, it's not that we disappear, it's that we go focus on other things that are more important to us, be it relationships, be it family, be it adventure, climbing Mount Peru, whatever it is that calls to us. So, sometimes other things take priority. Your mental well-being really has to take priority at certain times in your life, and that's perfectly okay. Sometimes I'm an amazing mom, an amazing CEO, an amazing mentor, an amazing sister, and sometimes I drop balls. And that's okay, because I'm not Wonder Woman. And it's okay to not be Superwoman. Though I must say, I can rock a boardroom in high heels and with much sass. But really, ladies and men, I think one of the important things is to let go of the guilt. I learned pretty early in my career what makes me happy. And so I've learned to contract with the people in my life, be it the executive team around me or my family, to say, this is what it takes for Videsha to be happy. And so as a family, for example, we enjoy a certain standard of living. And so I've had to explain to my family that in order for us to have a certain standard of living, I need to work X hours of the day. There are other options. We could downgrade our standard of living. We could, move into a different geographic location, and we have a conversation. And so, I always say to my kids, I could stay at home and homeschool you. And the horror in their faces is just evident. And they're very happy to say, no, Mom, please go off and and make sure we have you bring in some gainful opportunities into life. So contracting with your stakeholders is very important. I'd say to my manager, one of the things that's really important to me as I've grown older is to be present when it is my kid's birthday. I had an amazing manager, and I say that quite sarcastically, a few years ago, where he was from the US, and so he would decide, one of my kids are born in December, and he would decide that was the best time for him to bring his family out on a vacation to Africa. And so, I would have to go traipsing off into the wilderness of Africa with him on the pretense of having business reviews, etc. And I missed many a birthday. And, I made a choice at some point to say, this is a non-negotiable. So I always say to my stakeholders, these are my non-negotiables. These are the things that's important to me. And so we need to work around them as far as possible. And so, for me, it's really important to communicate with your team, with your managers, with your family, in terms of what's important to you, and also how, we all have the constraint of time. So you have to decide what is the best use of time. And so, guys, work-life balance is an interesting concept. You can strive to have balance in your life, in different elements of your life, at different times of your life. But, that's when life throws you those curveballs, and you have to be willing to deal with it, I guess. The other thing, I guess, is also about self-awareness and knowing yourself. Like I said, having integrity is very important, and understanding who you are. When I was first made a manager, I was pretty young. I was 24 years old, and I didn't know how to do this. And so I looked around me, and I looked at the people who I thought were successful managers, and I thought, well, let's emulate those behaviors. And so I became one of those managers that was so driven. I would not take no for an answer. I drove for results. And one evening, one of the head of our core infrastructure group at that time said to me, "Oh, you're doing so well. People are so scared of you. The minute you say, this is Videsha's project, they jump onto it." And he said, "Well done. This is commanding respect." And I smiled, and I went home, and I cried. And I cried a lot, because this was not me. I was being someone else in the workplace, and I was somebody else as Videsha. And so this is where I learned the joy and the benefit of having mentors and coaches, because I went to my mentor with this dilemma, and she looked at me and she smiled, and she said, "Okay, it's time to teach you about situational leadership." And this was such an amazing skill set for me, where I learned that there are situations where you have to have critical discussions, where you have to have difficult discussions. But that doesn't mean that that is where you need to live all of the time. And so I learned how to quite easily step into and out of situations, and really have situational leadership as an art that was really, really beneficial to me. And so having mentors is really important. Finding those, guys, having role models is really important. And also, if you can, being a role model is important. So find those people that inspire you. And there isn't one role model that is going to inspire you in every aspect of your life. There are many leaders that are great at business, but not great at life. And so I found that I need to have different role models that inspire me in different areas of my life. And at the same time, I've learned that people need to see themselves reflected in the success of others. So it is important to have people that look like us, that think like us, that have the same challenges that we have. And then you become relatable. So it's important to look for role models, and it's important to be a role model as well. And then, guys, for me, leadership is leadership is not about a title. Leadership is about a behaviors. And leadership is a privilege. It is an honor to be given the opportunity to take care of a team and to help them grow to their full potential. And I always say we stand on the shoulders of giants that came before us, especially as women, especially for those marginalized societies, especially for those groups that have never been able to be heard before. You know, we really stand on the shoulders of so many giants that came before us, people who stood up for our rights, people who, you know, walked the streets and you know, made sure that they were fighting for justice, and people who even gave their lives so that our generation can enjoy a place in the boardroom, so that our generation can have a voice at the dinner table. And so I think it is really important for us to use the platforms that we are given to create sustainable change and to create even more opportunity for our next generation. So being a voice for the voiceless is important. Challenging the status quo is important. Taking the path less trodden is important. And more important, forging new paths is very important. But most importantly, it is the duty of those of us that are given the platform to be able to impact change. And so one of my big lessons on leadership is to never come from a place of fear, never to lead from a place of fear, always lead from a place of love. And that always gives me the best results. And one of the things that I think about is rather cliche, but it's actually true, guys. Do what you love and you will never work a day in your life. And I do believe that work is love made visible. And when I say work, that is working at all the different roles that you have, right? Mom, CEO, mentor, tutor, etc., etc. It's important. And it's important to put your heart in everything that you do. So knowing your why is important, but if you're not going to put your heart and soul into something, really don't do it. Don't waste your time and don't waste the time of others. And tapping into genius is really simple in theory, but it takes practice. It comes from mastering the activities that you really love. When I am hard at work with something that I love, time disappears. Everything disappears. I'm in the zone. I feel it. I feel it really deeply. And I always say I'm in my Zen space and I can work for hours and I do not feel it, not in my body, not in my mind. You know, I am producing the best work possible when I am in that Zen space. And so for me, it's important that I create the space to be able to have those Zen moments. And it's also important to make sure that I spend a lot of time at the workplace. It is important to me to ensure that when I am there, I am happy. And yes, I do have the luxury now of, you know, sitting in an environment where I probably get to set up an environment where I can thrive. But I've also climbed the ladder. I've had to sit in many spaces where, you know, I had to accept contrast. I've sat in many spaces where I've had to make decisions. And looking back, I think one of the things that is important is doing what you love and making sure that you're happy in doing that in the workplace every single day. And trust me, once you find your Zen, I mean, I always say I'd work for free because I love what I'm doing, but I think I say that because I know it will not be a reality, guys. But really, that is the feeling. I would do what I do every day for free because it gives me fulfillment. It gives me a sense of purpose. And so that is really, really important. The other thing is growth never happens in a comfort zone. And so you have to stretch yourself. You have to be courageous if you want to really experience life at its zenith. And learn to say yes more than you say no. Say yes. Grab opportunities that speak to your heart and your soul. You know, like IRMSA was saying earlier, step up, show up. take that seat at the table. And experiments are really necessary, guys. These are the experiences that create growth and new possibilities for all of us. So I give you an example. I once was successful in an EMEA role, so the Europe, Middle East, and Africa role. And it was a big move for me, but unfortunately, due to personal circumstances at that time, I was unable to relocate. And one of the criteria was I had to be located somewhere in the European part of the world. And so, I remember saying to one of my mentors, oh, I'm really sad because I'm going to have to turn this opportunity down. And she said to me, but why? And I said, well, I can't relocate. And she said, well, then ask them how you make it possible within the boundaries that you have. And, I'd never thought of that. My first instinct was to say, thank you, but no, thank you. So I went to the table with solutions and options that were different. And yes, I had to sacrifice. I had to travel. I agreed to take the role and do it from South Africa, but that meant I had to travel, which meant I had to sacrifice time with my family. But it was important for me to still be here on this continent. And so I made it possible. So it's very important to ask how, not just to say no. How do we make this possible? And in doing so, I think I created many opportunities for many other people that were bound to a geography because I was able to deliver what was required. And so this company became much more amiable to having leaders, based all over the world versus having to be in a certain geography. So, sometimes when you're brave, you open up new paths for people that never existed before. One of the other lessons, guys, is to be curious. Be infinitely curious. Ask why and why and why and why. And the universe will yield its secrets to those who demand to know. Have an insatiable appetite for lifelong learning. There is always somebody that knows more than you. There is always something to be learned. So be humble and make sure that you spend your time wisely. The other thing is that there is always a place and a purpose for everything under the sun, including you. Being different is not a liability. Being different is an asset. Make sure that you use your uniqueness to put your stamp on the world and make it a better place for those that come after you. I was born in an Indian township, and many of my friends had the same dream. It was to marry the guy next door, have 2.5 children, and live happily ever after. And not to knock that dream. It is a great dream for those who dream it, but that was not my dream. My dream was to really go out there. I wanted to see the world. I wanted to meet people. I wanted to experience cultures that were new. I wanted to learn new things. I wanted to leave a legacy. And so I dreamt big, and I dreamt in like 5D, guys. And I coupled that with hard work, perseverance, etc. And my dreams came true. And so it's important to set big dreams for yourself. If your dreams are dreams that you can easily see achievable, then you're not fulfilling your full potential. So dream big and don't apologize for figuring out your own self. You don't have to be like everyone else. You have your own place in the world, and so claim it, and you are worth every single second. Claim your space in an unashamed manner, and make sure that, you're stretching yourself. And in doing so, you will create spaces for other people who are different too. And I guess, guys, some of the other things, Val, please let me know, because, I can go on and on and on forever. But cultivating an attitude of gratitude is key to success. Gratitude helps in so many ways. I have a daily routine. When I wake up in the morning, I think of 3 things that I'm really grateful for. And it can be something really simple, like, oh, what a wonderful pillow this is, to big things like, I am so grateful for the fact that I have a job that is fulfilling, and it can be everything else in between. But I think of a few things that I'm grateful for. And when I go to bed at night, I do the same. And I found that this is really magic. it almost forces me to put myself in a space of positivity and in a space of appreciation. And I have really found that being grateful brings abundance to me in many ways. And so there are many other things, but Val is informing me that I'm running out of time. So let me summarize. Well, let me end with never be afraid to ask for help. Asking for help is a strength. Being able to ask for help is a strength. Being vulnerable is a strength. And be willing to receive help. Be willing to receive compliments, accept them, own them, for they are yours. And guys, to be alive is a very precious thing. It goes in line with the gratitude. Don't forget how amazing you are. Don't minimize your own experience. Don't ever doubt for 1 minute how important you are. You are a spark of the divine, and you can be, do, or have anything that you want. I always say the only obstacles that I have are the limitations and the limiting beliefs that I place on myself. And as you get older, there is much that you are taught and conditioned that you have to unlearn. That's a big thing in life, is unlearning many things in order to unearth your own full potential. But as you grow into your own possibility, as you grow into your own power, the possibilities are infinite. So lastly, wherever you go, go with all your heart. And always know that, dear younger self, that it is never too late to be who you might have been. And so if I could have just 1 more minute, Val, I wanted to read an excerpt from a poem, which I do love. It's called Remember, Women. Remember, women, you were born, a life giver, a miracle creator, a magic maker. You were born with the heart of 1,000 mothers, open and fearless and sweet. You were born with the fire of queens and conquerors, a warrior's blood you bleed. You were born with the wisdom of the sages and the shamans. There is no wound that you cannot heal. You were born to be the teller of your own tale, and therefore before none should you ever kneel. You were born with an immeasurable soul, reaching out past infinity. You were born with passion, abandon, and to name your own destiny. So never forget you are woman, divine, and that you have been from the very start. Thank you so much for the honor of sharing with you.